Lauren and I had been together for 5 years. We had celebrated each other's birthdays for 5 years. 5 years of me pretending to detest anniversaries, lazy Sundays, and late-night discussions about reality TV, while secretly keeping track of each competitor's past just to follow her tirades. 5 years of her rolling her eyes at my obsession with 90s cartoons and my teasing remarks about her ridiculous coffee order, 4 pumps of vanilla, 2 espresso shots, oat milk, and a caramel drizzle. I was wondering whether I had been a total fool as I sat in my car gazing at the engagement ring on my finger. We met at a housewarming party, the kind of crowded, muggy get-together where everyone was either sweating or pretending they weren't. My best friend, Marcus, had dragged me there, insisting I needed to go out more. Lauren had arrived with her closest friend, Tessa, the party animal. We found ourselves standing next to each other at the makeshift bar, a messy counter stacked with half-empty liquor bottles. We both shuddered simultaneously when a guy tried handing us IPAs. We exchanged a knowing look, a small smile, and we just clicked. That night we talked for hours, about old cartoons, awful drinks, and what we'd do if we won the lottery. Her answer? Travel the world. Mine? Buy a ranch and rescue animals. Dating was effortless. No overanalyzing words, no power games, just us. After a year, we made it official. After 2, we moved in together. By year 3, we adopted Benny, our high-energy rescue dog. By year 5, I knew I wanted to marry her. No flash mobs, no skywriting, just a quiet Saturday morning hike at Best Lookout Point. I had prepared a heartfelt speech, but when I pulled out the ring, all I could do was ask, "Will you marry me?" She grinned, no hesitation, and said yes. That was last summer. We started planning the wedding right away. She mostly nodded along when asked about flower arrangements or seating charts. "Whatever you want, baby," she'd say. The date was set for October, and I thought everything was falling into place. Looking back, I see the signs now. 3 months ago, they were subtle. Hesitations whenever I brought up the wedding. A half-second pause before she answered, then a nod or a subject change. Then came the passive comments. "Do we really need to invite everyone? Weddings are expensive. Are we sure we want a big wedding?" I brushed it off. Stress, I told myself. Then, the late replies, the one-word texts. "Sure. Sounds good." She started spending more time with Tessa, going out late. Yes, she valued her space, but she was distant even when she was home. Still loving, still checking her phone constantly. I told myself it didn't matter. Then came last Friday's dinner. Marcus had suggested I do something special to relieve Lauren's stress. Remind us why we were getting married. I made reservations at Venzo, an Italian restaurant she had been, dying to try. I even stocked the fridge with her favorite oat milk caramel drink. But as soon as we sat down, I felt it. She was preoccupied, barely speaking, smiling at something or someone on her phone. I tried to re-engage her, talking about honeymoon plans. Then she said it. "I'm not sure I'm ready for all this. The wedding, the honeymoon, marriage, 5 years together, 8 months engaged." She wasn't sure. She brought up Tessa's stories of miserable marriages, how things always fell apart after the honeymoon. She mentioned her parents' divorce. She had been thinking. I barely tasted my food. The drive home was silent. When we got there, I asked if she wanted to talk. She said she needed time to think. Then, she curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, and fell asleep like nothing had happened. The next morning, she barely looked at me. "I'm heading to Duffy's sports bar for drinks with Tessa," she muttered. I stayed home, mindlessly, scrolling my phone. Then a text from Jake, one of Lauren's co-workers. "Hey man, you okay?" Before I could reply, my phone rang. Jake sounded hesitant. "I don't know if I should tell you this, but Things got weird at the bar tonight. I braced myself. Some people were teasing Lauren about the wedding. Asked if she was really ready to settle down, and she laughed. She said, if Daniel was richer and hotter, she'd be excited to marry him. My blood went cold. Are you sure she said that? A lot of us heard it. Someone even called her out, but she just waved it off. Said it was a joke. A joke. I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I finally got home, she was passed out on the couch, oblivious to the damage she had just done. The woman I trusted beyond all others. The one I thought I'd spend forever with. The saddest part? The next morning, her mom called me, sobbing, saying there was something I needed to know. I hadn't slept all night, replaying everything in my mind, her hesitation, the passive comments, the growing distance. Now, Diane, Lauren's mother, was crying, telling me it was important. I took a deep breath and called her back. She answered immediately. Daniel. I didn't want to say anything until Lauren did, but there's someone else. The words hit, like a hammer to my chest. My stomach dropped, my entire world tilted, and suddenly I knew this wasn't just cold feet. This wasn't stress. This was betrayal. I took out my phone, navigated to Lauren's number, and pressed the call button. Her voice was heard on the second ring. She sounded hesitant, as if she realized we were done. Daniel, don't you realize why? My voice was sharp. I wasn't going to beg. I was simply perplexed. She shakily breathed. I won't spend another second of my life trying to convince you to choose me. After a lengthy silence, I spoke in my quietest voice ever. I'm sorry. I squeezed my eyes shut. But it was too late. I heard her sigh, and after a final quiet exchange, I hung up. I wish I could say it was simple. That I felt relieved when I woke up the next day. That I felt free. But some mornings I still wake up reaching for her, because grieving doesn't work that way. On some nights I gazed at the engagement ring still in its box, realizing she was no longer there, pondering how we got here. But as time passed, things became simpler. I focused on myself again. I returned to the gym, made new acquaintances, and booked a solo trip to an upstate cabin, because why not? And 3 weeks later, Diane texted me, asking how I was doing. I hope you know that I smiled for the first time in a long time, because I finally believed I deserved better, and I'll find it eventually. But for now, I was content just being myself again. And that was enough. The day after I broke up with Lauren, I woke up feeling nothing. Not anger, not sadness, no confusion, just emptiness. For months, I had been holding on to a relationship that had already ended, fighting to convince a woman who had stopped choosing me that I was worthy. Now, there were still loose ends. The apartment, the wedding cancellations, splitting our life together like assets in a business transaction. But I had nothing more to say. And I didn't want to see her again. Life, however, doesn't let you leave so easily. 5 years. 5 years of building a future with someone, and now I found myself waiting for her, one last time. She arrived at the apartment to collect her things. I had spent the last few days at my brother Jason's house, giving her space to pack. But now, I had to return to make sure everything was divided correctly. The apartment felt different, but the walls were still there. The framed photos we had taken. Her favorite blanket draped over the couch arm. Ghosts of a life we once shared. When the door opened, Lauren was there. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Her hair was pulled back. No makeup, no carefully crafted presentation, just her. For years, I had loved that face, built a future around it. But now, it was just a stranger's. I swallowed. Hey. She didn't answer. Just returned to taping up a box. The sound of ripping tape drowned out whatever words she might have said. I nodded but didn't look at her. I didn't want to see her sadness. I didn't want to care. "I'll just grab my things," she murmured. She moved silently, gathering her books, clothes, and the ridiculous assortment of throw pillows she had insisted on buying. Eventually, she stopped in front of me holding a framed photo of our first trip together. "Do you want to keep it?" I glanced at it. A picture of us on a Florida beach, tanned, happy, arms around each other, believing we had eternity ahead of us. I reached out, took the frame, and without thinking, threw it in the trash. Her breath caught, but I didn't care. She was the one who had thrown us away first. We worked in silence for an hour until there was nothing left to divide. Lauren stood by the door, keys in her hand, luggage packed. "I guess that's everything," she whispered after a long pause. I nodded. She hesitated. "I never meant to hurt you." I laughed without amusement. She winced. "But you did," I replied. She swallowed hard. "I loved you, Daniel." For the first time, I truly looked at her, and I realized I no longer loved her. Slowly, I said, "I loved you too." Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Maybe she had shed all her tears before she told me the truth, or maybe she simply didn't have any left. "Do you think we'll ever talk again?" she asked. I held her gaze. "No." She inhaled sharply, but nodded. "All right." Another pause. "Goodbye, Daniel." I turned away without responding. A few seconds later, I heard the door close behind her, and for the first time in 5 years, I was alone. But I didn't cry. I didn't drink myself into oblivion. I didn't sit in the dark listening to sad music. I just existed. At first, the silence was strange. I returned the wedding suit I never got to wear. The apartment felt empty, then peaceful. Instead of spending a week in a honeymoon cabin, I canceled the trip and used part of the refund to book a solo getaway. I stopped waiting for a message that would never come. 3 months after our final. "Goodbye. I ran into an old friend at a bar." Marcus grinned and patted me on the back. "Damn, you look good." I nodded, taking a sip of my drink. "You dodged a bullet." I exhaled. Maybe. But more than that, I had finally woken up.